Welcome. I'm David Eichholtz, and we're standing here in David Richard Gallery in New York City, our uptown location on 121st Street. And today I'm joined by Jeremy Gilbert-Rolfe, and this is his solo exhibition, first solo exhibition with our gallery, and sort of a unique show in that it's a debut of new work, largely painted between late 16, 17 through 2022. And then opposite from where we're standing right now, you can't see them, but there's a suite of 5 paintings that he had painted in California. And in fact, it was some of the last paintings he had painted in California from 2015. But he did present them at John Baldessari's, well, I guess it was a studio.
Yeah.
And they had been out there. And it was sort of an interesting presentation because of the fact that they're called 5 times during the day. So it's interpretations of sort of color and imagery or sort of memory at 5 different times of the day, like early morning or dawn, or midday, late afternoon and evening. So, but the space where they were presented had a lot of glass. And so it was nice that you had lots of natural light in there, which was a great opportunity to present something like this, to kind of make your case literally. But this is the first time they've been shown in New York, as I understand. And then I'm not sure if this other painting to the right of me there, it's a very geometric painting. That's from 2009. Had that ever been presented before?
In LA.
Oh, in Los Angeles, okay.
Manny Sullivan showed it.
Oh, okay, good. All right, because I couldn't remember. So it's juxtaposed with these paintings here, which are all very new. And so what I'd like to do today, these conversations are meant to be sort of like being in the artist studio and very casual and just talking about the work and sort of inspirations and sort of what you're thinking. So when these paintings arrived, I've looked at your work a lot over the years, and so when these came, I was sort of, there's something sort of reminiscent about a lot of your work in them, mostly the geometry, your interest in geometry and using that as a key element in your work. But I was really struck with how painterly a lot of these are, and especially like the ground in this one, and also kind of examining your paintings up close and more personally than I had in the past. What I was struck by is, even though you like geometry, this is a good example. They read hard edge from a distance, but they're really not hard edge. They're extremely hard edge. It doesn't look like you tape things off and have these sort of really rigorous hard edges. And in fact, moreover, they're very painterly on the inside. So I was kind of curious about that. And is that also something that you've historically done, or is that sort of a newer nuance in your painting, in terms of the interiors of your sort of rigid, geometric shapes?
It comes and goes. It comes and goes.
Oh, okay. So
my painting is about movement and movement's relationship to light, if you like, but movement overwhelmingly. Parenthetically, that's an earlier painting than you
It's what?
mentioned. That's quite an early painting. That's a painting. That's the first painting I made in California. This one. You said
What
it was
year?
a very early work, but it's not a very early work. It's earlier than these 3.
Right.
Yeah, later than that certainly. So back to your question. How painterly things are depends on what they're supposed to do, and I don't know whether I'd use the word painterly, but that's cool enough.
So you think about it piece by piece, each painting sort of is a very individual.
Yeah, totally. And I take quite a time between paintings to think about them and to think what they're going to be. And also, most of them don't begin and end in the same place. So it took quite a while to get to that blue color, for example.
Yeah, this one.
Yeah. And and so the green one down there, that's more fluid.
Yes, it's much more gestural and.
Yeah, I know gestural. We can use the word gestural. It works, but they're really painted in a way that is demanded by the painting, and.
So then it sounds like that also sort of unfolds as you go along, and it's a bit of an organic process, because what I was curious about is if you do start with something that's slightly more rigorously, hard edge or geometric, is that preconceived, or does it just sort of fall out of the work, and sometimes you decide some elements should just be much more, saturated and hard edge and have a very defining sort of shape, versus something that's a little bit more softer edged or diffuse.
Yeah. And obviously in the blue one is a good example. It's differently gestural, as you would say, in different places. So that, for example, these areas are quite different than that area.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of like this greenish colour touches the blue, but that one's got the undercolour that separates it from the blue. So everywhere things take on a life of their own, and go ahead. I mean, I think the paintings should seize the space they're in. They should. And Nina Nosai years ago in the 70s said to me, "Oh, you make big level paintings, So paintings always look bigger than they actually are."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a lot of binaries in your work, and this was a good one to point that sort of out, which is these sort of geometric shapes, but floating on this very soft, brushy sort of ground.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is, this one is also another good example of, I'm trying to figure out, because you talk about mostly brushes, but it does look like there's a fair amount of palette knife work with your work.
I don't know very much, but there is.
Really? Okay, because there's another thing that you've done, and it's not on these walls, it's over on the other two walls, but where it does look like, it looks like it's pastel. Because of the diffusion and that sort of breakdown. And part of it is from, it seems like, deploying then a brush over a more harder surface that's been, pulled with a palette knife to create some disruption in the surface. And so it kind of lends itself then to soften out the brushing, which you don't do super saturated. So the one I'm particularly looking at is that early dawn there, which is sort of a very puce sort of gray pink. And that one looks very much like, pastels, so the white there. So that's sort of interesting. The reason why I ask on this one is I'm not sure if this was like the gessoing, or if this was actually some palette knife work with the pigment and then going over it. Because the effect that you get from that, either way, is what really sort of makes this very interesting. And there's also a lot of underpainting in there, so that you can see that there, before these final layers of this really sort of almost like a hash mark that you did over the top, really is what gives this painting a lot of depth.
Sure.
And a lot of optical sort of activity, in my opinion, even though it's not, we think of optical work as very hard edge, but you can get optical effects and these sort of illusory depths or spatial perspective you know, with just using color and some sort of irregular patterning. And even though, like I said, these are sort of softer edge, there's a number of things you've deployed in here that makes it very optical.